Alright, so this project, you do not get anything from me. You're starting this one completely from scratch. And because we're starting it from scratch, we make a brand new project. So from pretty much here on out, we're going to go to File Project window for all of our projects. You click the New button. You give it a name. Bouncy Ball. Make sure it goes in your 2540 folder, and then we hit Accept. Okay. The bouncing ball, remember, 2 seconds of rolling, 3 seconds of bouncing, and then 2 seconds of rolling, right? That's what I said we were going to do with it. Do not do the 2 seconds of rolling, the 3 bounces, and then the 2 seconds of rolling right away. Do the bouncing first. That way it's easy to isolate, to fix it. Maybe you have to redo it, whatever. And then you can add the rolling on the start and the end of it, okay? So I'm going to create a sphere. The sphere that you choose can be either a NURB sphere or a polygon sphere. This assignment, it does not matter. I will show you why you would pick one over the other. This is a polygon. This one is a NURBS. There we go. Photoshop. Actually, I'll just go to the one with all the divisions. Alright, so I will grab this one here. That one looks gorgeous. And I'm just going to save that picture into my folder. Ball 40. There's my bouncy ball folder. Source images. Smiley. Okay. I'm going to assign a material to these. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to grab this regular Fong. You would still use your AI Arnold stuff. It doesn't look like RenderMan's going to be available before the semester is over, so we're just going to stick with Arnold for the rest of it. Alright, so here are how these two textures place on this ball. The polygon comes in like this, and then the NURBS comes in like that. Either one of these can be manipulated or tweaked. I can go to, come on, UV editor. There it is. I can go to my UV shell, and I can make this bigger so that it fits. Okay, I can also, he doesn't look perfect because he is filling this entire image. I'd actually want to bring this into Photoshop and shrink it down so he's basically in the center of that image. It'll take me 2 seconds to do. I'll just open Photoshop real quick so you can see it. Yes, I know it. 2540. Smiley. Okay, so I'm just going to grab this whole layer and shrink it down. And then I'm just going to do a little Photoshop magic and just fill this entire thing with that same yellow. And then just erase all the white from here. It's good, and I'll even erase this black area here also. There we go. So now I have a completely yellow surface with my smiley face on it. Oops. And then I will just save that. And then he reloads. There he is. So now I can just reshape this and get it to fit exactly how I want his face to look. Okay, so now it's a smiley face on the ball. It actually looks like the Pringles guy. Now, with the polygon, I had to do some tweaking on that in order for this to work. The NURBS, he automatically looked pretty good. I just have to rotate it, which isn't a big deal. I go to that material. I go to the Place 2D Texture, and I just say rotate 90 degrees. And he rotates perfectly to 90 degrees. Okay, so NURBS, in this case, if you're doing a texture like that, are actually easier than polygons. But there's not a whole lot of stuff we would easily be able to tweak, okay? So, whatever one you want to use. Polygons have more divisions. You can tweak the stuff after, doesn't matter. This one, you can't really tweak the polygon or the UVs. You just have to be able to rotate it, or using these tools here, modify where that texture is going to be. However that works. All right. So it doesn't matter for now. I'm just going to reset my stuff. And I'm going to reapply my Lambert shader. Okay. So first things, I like to make sure he's sitting on the ground. We talked about that when we did our first animation stuff. I'm going to set his translate Y to 1. That sits him on the ground. And then I freeze my transforms so that all of these are back to being at 0. Okay. I'll also delete history so everything's nice and neat. All right, cool. So now I'm going to get him to bounce. The way that the bounce is going to look, and if you Google search any bouncing ball animation type thing, you're going to get stuff that looks like this. If it helps you to have this up the entire time you're working on it, definitely have it up. We need to know where the ball is going to be perfectly round. We need to know where it's going to be stretched out. We need to know where it's going to be squished down. So these things help. So we do not attack all of this at the same time. That is way too much stuff to try to animate all at once. Just like the little swinging thing, we animated position of that base part, and then we went back and animated the swinging of the arms, and then we went back and offset each one of those arms. Okay, so there's a process of how you should animate this. I would recommend animating just the translate Y first, then the translate X, then your squishes and rotates, and then your squishes and squashes. Okay, that's the order I do it in. That's the easiest way to do it. If you want to do it the hardest way, do it however you feel like it, but that's the easiest way to do it. So translate Y first. We have our stuff set up so that I could just hit S when I hit select translate Y. I'm at frame 1. I need to know how high up he is going to bounce and come down. Keeping in mind that I want to render this out, I would not want him to bounce up this high because I have to eventually keep him in frame for that, and that's way too far to keep him in frame. So there's my ground. This looks like maybe a reasonable height for him to bounce is right about there. Okay, so on my screen it's 10. Maybe you want to go 12. Definitely don't go crazy with that number. Oops. And then how far? I'm going to go, I don't know, maybe 20 frames, and then I'll set a key there. Now you may have noticed that I changed my value, and then I changed my frame, and it didn't update where that is. You, on the other hand, will change your value, you'll update your frame, and it'll jump back to where he was. Left clicking in the timeline updates your viewer, updated where the ball is. Middle clicking and dragging doesn't do that. Okay? So that's important because sometimes you'll go through and set up your character, get him in the exact position you want, and realize you didn't advance your time. Middle click and drag, and then you can set your key so you don't ruin that position. Some poses will take you 5 or 10 minutes to get your character exactly how you want them to be. You don't want to waste that time. So I typically just middle click and drag. All right. So here it is at 1. Here he is at 20. And then I'm just going to assume that at 40 he'll be back on the ground. So I'll just reset that to 0 and set a key. Then I will go to 60. I'll put him back in the sky. Oops. Back in the sky. I'll go to 80. I'll reset this to 0. I'll set a key. I'll go to 100. I'll pull him up. I'll set a key. I'll go to 120. Put him back to 0. And then set a key. Okay? I put that at 0 so it's easy to remember. 0 is always the ground. If it was at 1, then I have to type in 1 every time and remember that it's 1. That's harder to do. All right, so this is what I have so far. Cool. All right, so find patterns. Whenever we're animating something, find a pattern of something that you've done. Whenever you're doing anything, find a pattern of some repetition and see if you can eliminate that repetition. So if you'll notice, my first keyframe was at 0, and then I moved it up. Then I put it at 0 again, and then I moved it up. Then I put it at 0 again, and then I moved it up. And then I put it at 0 again, and then I moved it up. If I have 50 bounces, I'm going to drive myself crazy with that. Here's a 10 times more efficient way to set keyframes on something like that. So I know my first keyframe is at 0. I know that 40 is at 0. I know that 80 is at 0. I know that 120 is at 0. I know that 160 is at 0. Okay? You see how I went through and set all my zeros first? That makes it easier. Then I can just come to 20 and pull it up and then set a key. I can go to 60 and pull it up and set a key. Go to 100, move it up, set a key. This makes it even easier. Okay? Same animation. Boom, boom, boom. Okay? Now I could take that even a step further. There we go. And I could just set a key here, middle click on 60, set a key, middle click on 100, set a key, middle click on 140, set a key. All of these are at the same value. So it bounces up to that same spot. Then I could jump to the graph editor and then just do this. Move it down, move it down, move it down. Okay? So it makes it a lot easier for me to be able to just say, I know he's going to progressively get less and less because his first jump he's going to go highest, his second jump not as highest, third jump not as highest. Okay? So now, I'll close this too. All right. Pretty ugly. All right, so what do you think is off about my bouncing ball animation so far? The graph editor, right? So what do we need to fix about this? What was that? Smooth out the tops? Okay, we can smooth those out a little bit. We can go to our curves and do weighted tangents, and then free tangent weight, and maybe smooth these out some. What else? The bottom two. So what should the bottom look like? Should it be slowing down before it hits the ground? No. Right. When it leaves the ground and when it approaches the ground are the two fastest times that it's going to be moving. Okay? So there should be no easing in or out of those. So I'm just going to grab all the bottom keyframes and just click this linear button. And that points them basically straight up. So now if we just watch just this simple part, it feels like it's hitting it a little bit more, okay? I'm going to stretch this out. It doesn't, not doing what I was wanting to do. I really want to exaggerate this, okay? And you see how I grab one, it moves both? I'm going to break this. That's what that does. Somewhere under here, there's a break button right there. You could do it there too. So I'm basically, just like we saw in that video, I'm exaggerating these things because I want to make sure that the viewer understands what's happening. If I try to be too subtle, if I say, well, it really wouldn't, break it that much or really wouldn't move that much, you really have to force it so that the viewer understands what's happening. Okay? Let's zip back to there. Okay. So now it feels like it's actually hitting the ground and coming up, right? We feel like it hits the ground, comes up, there's a bit of hang time, and then it comes back down again. Okay, so what else is wrong? Correct. The whole movement of those shorter jumps should be less, right? If it takes him 5 seconds to come up and 5 seconds to come down in the first one, the next one should not take 5 and 5 because it's jumping less. So each one of these hills is going to go progressively down because we're jumping less and progressively shorter time span, okay? So I initially set this one to be 20 and 20 frames. So this one is going to be less. I don't need to worry about the actual numbers. I'm just going to hold down shift and middle drag to shrink these in. You could use the dope sheet, but I'm already here. I'm just going to do it there. Now, as I do this, you'll notice that my graph is now kind of funky looking. I need to just go back and tweak it. So typically what I'll do is just grab these and re-linear them, grab these and re-flat them, which is that guy, and then I'll just re-spread them out again. They were kind of in a point where they were a bit jacked up, so I don't want to do it. And just for reference, I would typically go and, this needs to come in a lot more. There we go. That's better. I typically will go through and tweak my positions first, okay, and then come back and adjust the graph. But you guys told me to adjust the graph first, so that's what I did. And again, I'll grab all of these and break them. There we go. All right. Cool. Now I want to add in a couple little guys, right? Because it still looks like it's kind of abrupt as to how he's moving. So just like I did before, I could just go into here, set some keyframes. Right? Just like that, no problem. And then I can just come in here and just move them. So pull that up, pull these in, pull this up. These top ones, they're not going to be as drastic, so I can just pretty much just do a little bit of tweaking to them, not as much as the other ones. Oops, I missed one. This should come back down to 0. This one go back to 0. There we go. This one come up. And I need one more keyframe just to balance this out. So now I'm just kind of squeezing everything in together. That should be good. Okay, cool. This one here, oops, these new ones are not linear, so I just need to make those linear again. There we go. Cool, that works. All right, so that's the Y, okay? Now I could play with this even further. One thing that we're gonna find is as it hits the ground with motion blur on, it's basically gonna blur it and we may miss that impact on the ground, okay? So it may come down and hit, but with motion blur, it's gonna blur where it hits, so it's like, it looks like it's floating a little bit. So one thing I like to do is I will actually add an extra keyframe right where it's hitting the ground. So right here where it's hitting the ground, I will basically go to the keyframe, middle click back a frame, and then set another key. Okay, and that will allow me to have an extra keyframe right there. And I just have to go into this, there it is, and just linear that one side. And linear this side. There we go. So I may have to tweak that again just slightly, but this will give me a better impact when it hits the ground. It's holding it just a little bit longer. So again, I'm going to go to this keyframe, middle click before or after, doesn't matter, and then set another key, and then just tweak those two graphs. Okay, go to the next one. I don't need to do it for all of them, just these first 3 main ones. And the reason we do the first 3 main ones is because those are going to be our main jumps. Those are the ones that are the biggest. They're going to roll. He's going to flip over. There's going to be a lot of squishing there. Maybe squish this a little bit further. There. Okay. Okay. So now with those 2 in there, you can see how it feels like it hits the ground and stays there a little bit longer. All right. That works. Okay. So Y is pretty much done. I could go and tweak it some more. That's good enough. So now I need to animate the X. And this is why we didn't want to focus on everything. My Y value I can just set right here and just look at it. Does it look good? You know, yes it does. If it's moving and trying to rotate and trying to do all this other stuff, it's way too complex to narrow down exactly what's happening. Y looks good. I can leave Y exactly like it is. I should probably save this. Okay, so now I'm going to animate the X. So I'm going to start, let's say, here. And I'll set, oops, I'll go back to the beginning. I'll set a key. I'll go up to the end, move it up a bit, and set a key. You will not know how far to move it up. All you have to do is set a key, set another key, and then see if that works. If it doesn't work, you may need to push it forward. You may need to pull it back. Okay, I'll show you examples of that. I'm pretty perfect, so I think this is going to be exactly what I want. It's not exactly what I want. And the reason it's not exactly what I want is because this curve has easy ease on it. So basically, as he's bouncing, he's going really slow up his first hill, and he's slowing down at the end. Not on the X at this moment. Okay? So when he starts bouncing, it should just be he goes, right? So he just like starts going. When he stops, he's going to stop eventually, but not right now. We still have his rolling that's going to happen before and after. That's where the easing will be, when he starts rolling and when he ends rolling. All right? So here you go. That's much better. Okay? So that feels pretty good. Now again, if we're not sure, let's figure out if that works. And the way we figure it out is we go to the end keyframe. I hold down shift, and whichever direction it is from this one, that's what I want to do, more or less. So if I want him to move less, I move it towards the other keyframe. If I want him to move more, I shift drag away from him. So this is going to be a pretty ridiculous amount of movement. That may be good. You know what? That actually looks like it works pretty good. Yeah, I actually think I like that. That's why we test this stuff out, right? Let's even go with even more ridiculous. Let's go like that much. That's way too much. Should be committed for going that much. There we go. Okay. Now, another reason that that doesn't work is, again, we have to have a camera following this motion. So that's a lot of ground for us to cover. A lot of ground for us to light and texture and all this other stuff. So that's like way too much stuff. Okay. It actually does look neat how far it's going, but not for our animation. So I'm going to jump him back to where he was before right there. Okay. A little bit more. Let's go there. Okay. All right. I like that. That's a good amount of movement there. Okay. Now, if you want to see what a too short, then I'll pull this up like that. Okay. So that's going to be too short. Okay. There's not a whole lot of X movement in there, so it looks stupid. Okay. That looks like a good amount. All right, so we did Y first. Y looks great. We did X. X looks good. Now we will do our rotating. Okay, and the rotate is something that always trips people up. We're only rotating in one direction. Okay, so looking at him, which direction am I going to rotate him? Forward, right? Like that. Right? Because that's the direction he would be rolling, so he would just continuously move that way. Okay? So I'm going to set it just on the rotate Z, which was that axis. So I set a key. And what I do is I'm going to go to my first bounce right here. Okay? Now, in order for our animation to work correctly, he has to rotate 180 degrees every bounce. Okay? So I'm going to just go to that first bounce and type in 180 and set a key. I'm going to go up to my next bounce. Okay, I skipped the other keyframe here. I'll need both of those to be 180, just the one. I go to my next keyframe. And what's 180 plus 180? 360. Good. And then I go to the next one. 180 plus 360. 540. If you guys watched basketball, you would know this stuff probably. I don't watch basketball. All right, so now we have it rotating. So what it's doing is every time it rotates, it's basically flipping over onto the other side of it. Okay? So if we watch this, if you didn't know you could do this, I think this is kind of a neat thing. You can go to like type. What? There we go. There's type inside Maya. And I'm just going to do a letter V. Cool. And then I'm going to just grab it. I'm going to center pivot it. I'm going to rotate it. Go. Oops. And I'm just going to put it on top of the ball so we can see which direction he's going, because obviously it's kind of hard to see which direction he's going. Okay, and I just P to parent it. Okay, so now as he rotates, Boom, boom, boom. Okay? Now the first three, he's going 180 every time. Regardless of what physics would do, he actually wouldn't go 180 every time. But in our animation, he's going to go 180 every time. Okay? After that, he can do whatever. So what I typically do is I'll grab the ball. I'll look at the rotate Z. And then I'll just go to the end of my animation. Set a keyframe. And then just move that keyframe so that it looks like it's in line with the rest of them. Okay? Down here, it's not in line. This is basically flowing up, and then it cuts over. Going here, that's a bit too drastic for the direction it was moving. So about there is a good amount. Okay? There's no specific number. It's just, does it look good? That's all we care about. Okay. So now if we rewind this and hit play again. I think I need to go back to this one and make sure this is linear. There we go. Let's try it again. Yep, there we go. Yep, that works. Perfect. Okay. So that feels like it works. You don't have to do the little V thing on top. I'm just doing that so you guys can see it. Cool. So now I'm going to get rid of the V because I don't want that to be bothering my next spot. All right, so translate Y was good. We moved on. Translate X is good. We moved on. Rotate Z is good. Now we move on. Now this is, again, the other part that confuses people because it's squishing and squashing. If you remember from the video, they said to make sure you don't simply scale it in one direction or shrink it in one direction. If it comes down this way, it has to come out that way. Okay? Let me grab just a regular sphere so you can see this better. I'll move it up into one. There we go. All right. So if I do this, oops, let me put its pivot on the bottom so we can see this better. If I do this, that's not squishing. He's just scaling down. Okay? What it feels like is it's deflating. What should happen is if this comes down like that, that these two sides here, I can grab this to do it, go out like that. Okay? That feels like it's been squished down. And the same thing the other way. If this comes in or up like this, then these two sides should go in like that. Okay? It's maintaining the same volume throughout. If I just did this, it's actually bigger. I mean, look at how big I can make this thing. That look like it's squishing or stretching. It looks like it's just getting bigger. All right. Whoops. So let me apply that to this guy. So if we look at this little animation, whenever he is hitting the ground, he is going to be flat like a pancake. Whenever he's launching into the air, he's going to be stretched out like a football. Okay? And then when he hits the top of his arc, he's going to be round again. Okay? So the fastest movements are going to have the most drastic things happening. So he's going to go from a football to a pancake to a football, and then back to a round shape. And then a football, a pancake, a football again, and then back to a round shape. Okay? You see how that's working. So let's go back here. All right. So here, the first one, obviously there's an exception to it because he's not squashed because he's just taking off. All right, so I'm going to go here and set a keyframe on its scale. Boom. I'm going to go up one frame. And this frame is when he's taking off. So what should he look like here? A football, right? So this gets stretched out. This gets stretched in. Set a key. Notice how I'm setting keyframes on scale X, Y, and Z. Obviously, that's important. Here he is at the top of his arc. What should he look like here? Round. I have to actually type it in. There we go. And then set a key. All right, coming back down again. Right before he hits the ground, what is he? Football. There. And there. And then right as he hits the ground, pancake. Okay. Now, as we're doing pancake on these, and as we're doing football, that may shift his Y. Okay, right now he was on the ground. Because I've squashed him, he's floating. So I'll come back later and I'll adjust those. So just ignore that for now. Okay. This frame he's on the ground too. We just ignore it. The next one he's back in the air, so he will be football. Foosball. Alright, and then we go up to where he's at his midpoint. Round again. Back to where he's almost hitting the ground. He hits the ground. He goes squishy. Now, you may get confused as to how big he actually was. Because we started off with a sphere that was 1, 1, and 1 for its scale, what should happen is when this one goes in, that one's going to go below 1, and when this comes out, that's going to go above 1. Okay, so I'm watching my scales here and making sure that all of my values are basically bouncing between above 1 and negative 1, or above 1 and below 1. If I go to my graph editor and I just look at my, I hate how it does that. If I just look at my scale X and Z, those two are the same. Here is my value of 1. So look how it goes below 1. It comes back to 1. It goes below 1. It goes above 1. It goes below 1. It comes back to 1. Okay? These here are where it's rounding back out into a ball at the top of the peak. These two are where it's scaling inward. So that's probably where it's football. And then these two up here are where it's stretching out. So that is probably where it's pancaking. Okay? If that makes sense. Cool. So there's that. We go up to here. Back to this. So I'm watching my scale to make sure I've scaled it above 1 because I went the other direction. Make sure as I scale this, it goes below 1. Set a key. Back to here. These all go back to 1. This may take, obviously, a couple times just to wrap your brain around like what I'm even talking about. But it will make sense in the end. It doesn't matter which one you grab first as long as you pay attention to it. Okay? Now that we're at the last bounce here, we don't really need to get into the football and pancake thing because we're not going to be doing that much movement on it. Okay? It looks ridiculous if you go to these smaller ones and try to do that squashing. It doesn't make any sense. So typically after this one, I'll basically just kind of round it back off. Okay, so now it's just back to being round again. Okay. So I'm going to go to the graph editor and I'm going to tweak it. So you get these soft X, soft Y, and soft Z. I just delete those. I don't know why it puts them there, but it does. Scale X and Z should be the same. Scale Y should be the opposite. Okay, so if I show all of them, you see how this is X and Z down here, and here's Y. So every time this one goes down, that one's going up, and this vice versa. Every time the red goes up, the green goes down. So what should happen is these should, just like everything else, progressively get smaller. So all I'm doing is bringing them closer to that one line, right there across that. Gradually, they should be getting closer to that 1. And the reason for that is because we're getting less exertion. It's not falling from as high of a height, so there's not going to be as stretchy. It's not going to be as bouncy or as pancakey. That's a word. Go.
The color of the lines, they match the colors of the X, Y, and Z in the bottom left of it.
Correct. They should match. These lines here should match X, Y, and Z for translate, rotate, wherever it is. It's only when you get into certain ones, like on the first one, the Game of Thrones one, those are custom attributes. They don't have a color. Okay, so we wouldn't see anything with those. Cool. So that makes sense here. I'm just going to stretch this one out a little bit more. Maybe there. All right, so that looks good. So we start off big right here. We get smaller, smaller, smaller. That's how it should happen, okay? Because the first bounce is going to be big stretches, big squashes, littler, 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 and then at the end we're back to being round. Okay, so now if we look at the animation, okay, Now I can go through and then start to tweak stuff. Okay, so I've set up all my stuff. My base animation is done. Now I need to go in here and just kind of look at it and see if I'm liking what's happening. Usually what happens is I don't like some of the rotates. So like right here where this is hitting the ground, sometimes I'll exaggerate this a little bit more and have it hit that way. Okay, I just may like a little bit more rotation when it does the football. And the same thing here. I may have a little bit more rotation at the end of this. So that way it feels a little bit more dynamic as far as the direction it's going. So I'll go to the next one, do the same thing. Right before it hits the ground, I'm going to give it a little bit more rotation. Right after it leaves the ground, I'm going to give it a little bit more rotation. And again, I can just go less and less on each one of those. That one's actually good. Okay. I also need to fix my translate Y, because like I said, whenever I do that pancake, it may be above the ground. Whenever I do my football, it may be intersecting the ground. So I'm going to switch to my front view. That's how that should work, Meg, by the way. You hold the space bar, and then you click and hold on this, and then you can get to all your cameras. But not the other one. We'll have to look at it. I'm actually going to switch to not my front view. My front view moves the ball, so he like moves away from here. I'm going to switch to my side view because the side view, I can see it just from one spot. And that way I can see right here, that's a pancake, he should be on the ground. So I just go in here to my translate Y, I move it down to the ground, and set a key. And I just watch again. There's another pancake that should be on the ground. Now it may seem kind of silly to go through and make sure it's on the ground for each one of these, but when you animate your stuff and you render it out, what you don't want are the ball looks like it's supposed to hit the ground, but there's this like big shadow underneath it. We don't want that. Okay, bounce, bounce, bounce. Everything's good there. Cool. All right. So again, I could look at this a couple more times and tweak it, modify it, and whatever else. It's up to you as to how deep you're going to go into that stuff. This is the base of what I want. Okay? So you should have, by the time you're done, your bouncing should look this smooth. Okay? Then we need to add the rolling, right? So I have to have it roll at the beginning, roll at the end. This is why we did this in this order. We focused on the bouncing. That's the most important part. That's the hardest part. To get the rolling in there, I just go to the dope sheet and I scoot this down. So how many frames is 2 seconds? 60 frames, right? So I just scoot this down to 60 frames. There's 60. There's my first frame. There it is. So I go to the beginning of this. I scoot it way back. I rotate it a bit. Oops. And I set keys. I should just need the translate X and rotate Z. I go to my graph editor, I look at that rotate Z, and again, I'm going to look at that angle that it's moving. I don't want anything crazy drastic like this. It goes really fast and then slows down. That doesn't make sense. I want it to flow nicely right into the animation. So I'm moving it so the rotate looks good. Now I also have to keep in mind how far it's moving. I should have kept that V. Dang it. I'll create it again. It was so hard to do. Center pivot. Move him over here. Alright, so now that V is parented to him. As he moves, look at how far he's moving in order for him to actually rotate. That doesn't make a lot of sense. He's rotating way too slow. And you can really see it probably in the front view. Where's he at? There he is. So if I go to wireframe, look how fast he's moving versus how much he's rotating. It actually doesn't look very realistic. So I have to either take this rotate and be a little bit more drastic with it and kind of blend it over here, or go to my translate X and just have him not move as far. Okay, either one works. It's just a matter of what I want to do. I'm going to blend that. I'm going to go here. And I think I will make his rotate X just a little bit more drastic. And then just smooth that out. Okay. Oops, where are you going? Alright, so now that feels better. It looks like he's moving an appropriate amount for how much he's rolling and vice versa. And see how that lines up perfectly with how he is rolling and rotating right into that? That was because we set it up right at the beginning, because our first one was at 0 and we animated it backwards so it would line up perfect. Okay. Then I'm going to do the same thing at the end. So my end of my animation is 183. So I go 183 plus 60 is 243. Punch it into this one. I go to 243. I move the ball. I rotate the ball. And then I animate or set keyframes on those two. And again, I look at my translate X, see what that's doing. Look at my rotate Z, see what that's doing. They both look like they're doing good. This could probably come down a bit more. This is where I'm going to have my easing in. This is where I'm going to have my easing out. Okay, so it eases out of this first position and it eases into this last one. Okay, the ball's picking up speed. That's where we have our eases. It's slowing down to stop. That's where we have an ease. Same thing on my translate X. There's an ease here and an ease there. In the middle, there shouldn't really be any easing because he's not slowing down for any of those hits. I actually could probably just delete both of those and the animation would still work. I'll leave it though. Alright, so he rolls. Sweet. That works. He might move a little bit far at the end. That seems like a bit far. Let's go to our front view again. Let's go to the end of this. Yeah, he's moving too far. Let's go to that translate X. I'll pull this up. Now I'm going to take this one and just soften that. There we go. It feels like he's stopping. Okay, sweet. Alright. So I've done the hardest part of this, which is animating the bouncing ball. He rolls for 2 seconds, bounces, squishes, squashes, rotates, all that jazz, and it looks good. Probably save it again. Yes. Now I have to create some sort of reason for him to be doing this kind of stuff. Like, why is he jumping? Why is he bouncing? It doesn't have to be an entire storyline. It doesn't have to be complex. Remember, our animation is about this bouncing ball. It's not about all the other stuff. We just add that to kind of finish it off. Bow, bow, bow. Taurus, there you are. So this specific ball is inside of a circus. He's showing everyone how he can jump through hoops. I'm going to go to where he's bouncing. Whoa, such a good bouncer right there. We'll make the radius a bit bigger just so it seems more obvious. Okay. I added more subdivisions too. Okay. It was kind of blocky before. It looks ugly. Added more subdivisions, nice and smooth. Alright. So now here he comes. There, two. So that makes sense as to why he's jumping, okay? We could also have a trapdoor if we wanted. Cube. Where does he start bouncing? Right there. Let's push this back. Platform down. I'm going to take my ground here and get rid of all the subdivisions. And I'm going to add in a couple. So right there. close. So now that's going to be something else I'll animate, and I'll just have this shoot up and at him. Alright, so that's good. So I'm going to go back to right here and set translates and rotate Z. And I'll set translate X also. Then I'll go up a couple frames. There we go. So it feels like, again, he's going up there and shooting it. Now, if we want to get really fancy with this, why not, right? We can add a helix. Don't get fancy unless you're comfortable getting fancy. So I'm taking that radius down. I'm adding more coils, like 6. Changing the height to 4. That was good. I'm going to move the pivot down here. Actually, that'll work just like that. That's fine. And I'm just going to set a keyframe on that height. So I'm going to go to height and go up to those 2 frames. Oops. And set a keyframe on that. Now, obviously, I look stupid. You know, I mean, it kind of works, but it's not bending the direction. So I'm going to go to animation. I'm going to go to deform, nonlinear right here, and bend. And what this is going to do is allow me to actually bend this thing. Okay? So I'm going to animate this as well. So I set a keyframe on it. Let me make it bigger first. Okay. I'm going to go up to those 2 frames. And then I can bend it towards it. Still needs to be bigger. Maybe not. That's not bending as much as I was hoping it would. Not bending as nicely. Alright, forget the bend. I'll use something else. I'm going to use... I'll use a lattice. Okay. So a lattice is a big box. It wraps around your object. I'm going to leave it like that. That's actually good. I'm going to go to lattice point, set a keyframe, go up 2 frames, and then just move these. Make that bigger. Make sure it encompasses the entire thing after it bounces up. Almost. Almost. There we go. Okay. So now I can grab these points here and here and here. There we go. So now we have a little bit of stretch to it, right? So it looks better. Okay. We could do other stuff too to make it actually like wiggle and all that, but for this we don't need to. Good. Right. So now he's rolling along. Boing. And then he rolls along there. Sweet. So there's our animation. So now the part would come where we do texturing and we do lighting. When you do your texture for the ball, it has to have something that shows off the rolling. You can't see this thing rolling unless there is some sort of texture on there. That's why I was showing you with the smiley face guy, it works perfect because when he's dropped on there, you can see him rolling around. There, there, there. And smiley. Let's see if he comes in the right direction. I hit 6. Nope, we're good enough. So you can see him rolling along. There we go. Or you can just do, it's a metal ball. So I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to break the connection. And I could use a ramp. That works. So I'll hit 6 again so I can see the texture. It's black on one side and white on the other. So what I do is I turn this to none, pull the white down, like that. That's cool. And now again, it's easy to see the ball rolling. Okay, or I can get a little fancier with this and add another black line. Or I can make it a colored line and go purple. How did purple get in there? I selected that somewhere. And you can go even fancier, depending on how fancy you want to get with this. Circular. Whoops. There you go. Look at that one. It's pretty fancy. Just changing what that ramp looks like will give you different results. Sweet. Save. Okay. Add some lights to it. Add a camera. The camera will follow it. Okay. Don't videotape it from back here. You can't see it. Don't go crazy with your cameras. We've talked about that before. You could do multiple cameras with this if you want. But just make sure that we see the entire thing of 2 seconds of rolling. 3 major bounces. Some little baby bounces. Whoops, where'd you go? There you are. And then obviously it rolling at the end for 2 seconds and stopping. Cool. Any questions? All right.